Let me give you a short introduction. Most of you are familiar with my work, and therefore I have to come up with some new information and in-depth stories. There's enough to tell, and I will, but not doing it without pics. It's all about image, you know, my work. I did hesitate for a moment when Simon asked me for this lecture, but when I heard the girls yelling, "Please, please, please," I couldn't resist. So I'm here. Unfortunately, I had a sudden cataract surgery, you know that, but it all went well. I'm here with 2 working eyes, and I'm here. Let's start. I cannot say my career happens to be. It was carefully planned. I knew exactly where I wanted to be later, and every move was dedicated to this very goal. In between, I made art. Even sometimes, artistic decisions were commercially given, to be honest. I desperately wanted to create, didn't matter what. First it was sport, after that came unsuccessfully science, then music, finally painting. I simply needed a living. So I had to come up with really new stuff that would people tempt to buy. Nothing new. So many musicians, writers, architects and scientists are working on the ultimate originality. They all want to hit. And if they were not ambitious with a touch of vanity, they wouldn't succeed at all. Let's leave now the psychological side of unity, but not after telling you that an artist is not a weirdo by definition. He also can be well structured and full of discipline. He even can be happy and balanced. During writing and composing the lecture, I became aware again about finding your own way, about finding the own way part of it. It's all about artistic growth. And in one of the other way, I can't get rid of telling proudly about my career. But I will try to make it bearable. No worries. Thanks for inviting me to be on this very inviting place. Let's have a look. The most silly question of all is, how does a contemporary artist make a living out of painting fried eggs? Let me tell you about that first. In the late 90s, in the Netherlands, there was no serious entrance for photorealism. After some good but also bad gallery experiences, like every artist has, I finally opened my own gallery, this one, in Amsterdam. Although I never had intention to do so, but I just rolled into it. At that time, I was seriously disappointed in making and selling paintings. That's possible. After a good start with more archaic work, to talk about later, and I quitted painting to start an Amsterdam brand store, because Amsterdam was my soul. I lived there. This beautiful store was located in the center of the city, in an old 17th century house, and I designed a lot of Amsterdam-related products to present and sell the Amsterdam feeling, a brand full of originality, freedom, happiness and simplicity. One of those products was a placemat with a photographed egg, fried egg on it. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of it, but I tell about it. I did the spaghetti and pizza as well. This brand store idea died premature, and finally I decided to try to sell some of my left paintings to pay the rent, and turned it into a gallery. I started painting again. No time to lose, and the placemat egg photo was a good start. I remember the excitement thinking of doing a painting of fried egg larger than life, hanging on the wall. Could this perhaps be a strong image to sell? This is the first egg I painted ever. This is from the photograph of the placemat. And this is a more recent one. And there is any difference, so there's any progress, I hope. Close up. In the meantime, these paintings are pretty iconic and spread out all over the world, as well their usage on covers, sides and posters. Of course, it was not meant to be such a super idea. It just happened as a result of sequence of artistic and commercial situations. The rent of that gallery was tremendous, and I like every starting artist, I'd like to prevent me from being a starving one. I didn't have much time to reflect and think about art. I only had to produce. And here, they are producing fried eggs too. In one of the museums, an egg painting was shown recently. The educational department even lets people paint fried eggs, especially baked by a famous chef. That's cool, isn't it? Yeah, what's the fascination people have with a fried egg, with the painting of a fried egg? I think there are many portals, like humor, metaphors, happiness. They are all supported by astonishment, surprise, and craftsmanship. Somebody once asked me to come up with one quote and one image to describe my whole oeuvre. And you know the image now, this fried egg. But the quote is, "Where photography ends, the painting starts." That very egg image is never leaving you once saw it. Actually, the final image is the most important. It can't be photographed like this, but this newly generated beauty doesn't exist really either, in reality either. It's a painting, not a fried egg. Like Magritte once said, "Ceci n'est pas une pipe, ceci n'est pas un œuf." Besides, for many it only exists in a virtual way, digitally or printed. Somewhere on the internet, it's even among the 10 most iconic food paintings ever on a list by museum professionals, academics and enthusiasts. People just fantasize with my eggs. Look at this, you can find it. So it's my favorite to paint, and now you know why. Besides, I never copy one, but start all over again. They are all different. Every time to begin the painting season with, I make an egg. I think I did about 20 or more large and medium ones. But it isn't boring. It feels more like landscape painting, doing white hills, ochre shores, under a giant shiny sun against an eternal and quiet blue sky. So before I go any further to tell you about how I started a long time ago, I'd like to show you a clip of some works already. They were ready for New York to ship, and this was some years ago. Let's have a break. It's getting very serious now. This is me, 22 years old, and it looks like I could be happier. And he's going to work on it, I'll tell you about. In 1977, I moved to Amsterdam to become a physical education teacher at secondary school. I also went to university to study human kinetics, but those efforts to free me from teaching came to nothing, and I aspired to become a piano player. Music was deeply anchored in my soul, but I didn't have any musical education. I just played out of the blue. Making a living out of that would have sent me in the direction of cafe entertainment, so I again stopped longing for that profession as a way to earn my living. At that time, I still felt that deep desire to make money by expressing myself. In the early 1980s, I started painting with an ambition. I was deeply touched by a contemporary Dutch painter, Karel Willink, and his prophetic, archaic landscapes. He was still working and living in Amsterdam at that time, and his distant horizons and fantastic views, filled with almost religious serenity, woke me up. Like these. It's a view in Amsterdam. He was predicting Second World War, people telling. Other inspirations included Paul Delvaux, Salvador Dali, René Magritte, and M.C. Escher, a Dutch graphical painter. They have that surreal atmosphere I admired so much. That would elevate my soul and created a new consciousness that I decided to shape in a painterly fashion. That deep feeling materialized for the first time when I worked on the painting Ireland. Out of the blue, this landscape emerged from my pencil and brushes. I realized this was the most beautiful way to live and to work. Materializing something very close to yourself out of nothing was a sort of godlike experience, and it gave me a very peaceful feeling. And now, on to my emergent style and subjects. In the Netherlands, realism was almost dictated by one surviving gallery in realism called Mokum. It was right around the corner from me, so I looked at the paintings every day. Its style was a bit surreal and magical, which I followed. Although this magical realism triggered and elevated me from daily life and reality, I lived right in the center of a very lively city and was witness to a rapidly changing society. Rioting squatters, property developers, the punk scene, hard drugs, addicts causing nuisance, graffiti. It was hard to ignore daily life so close to the red light district. I loved walking in the streets, visiting the flea market, eating fries from an open-air stand, and watching the young people. I took many photographs and captured the Amsterdam street life. The pop art aspect of my work slowly began to appear out of the melancholic swamp. Contemporary subjects attracted my attention, not to mention the beautiful Amsterdam girls. The punk scene was very alive in Amsterdam, and although I was not part of it, its appearance fascinated me. In the meantime, I tried to interest some galleries in selling my work, but they weren't interested. There were far more experienced and mature painters around, and the rough side of Amsterdam wasn't their cup of tea at all. Since I desperately wanted to make a living, I initiated contact with a very young postcard company. They were interested in the Amsterdam girls. So I continued doing more popular subjects, and I started designing postcards, using not only drawing but also photography. The medium postcard was not new, but very old-fashioned that days. This publisher, Art Unlimited, renewed the market by introducing postcards featuring contemporary art, seasonal themes, tourist attractions, and humor. There was no internet, you know. People just used to send cards. I jumped into this unlimited market with only one goal: to learn and how to make an image and make money by making smooth, pretty pictures. This was the view, the second card from the window of my studio I had in Amsterdam with my own 2 cats. Neighbor girl. I learned a card was an instant message that needed to communicate its concept within a split second. And I still believe this works in a painting too. The freedom to come up with so many ideas was wonderful. And for the first time in my life, I was successful. The booming market made hundreds of thousands cards were sold within a year. I was earning 3.5 cents per card in royalties and had finally found my way to earn a living in a creative way. Amsterdam again. And yes, there it is in 1985, for the first time ever, pop food, but still photography. In the late 1890s, I was very happy to stop teaching physical education at secondary school because I then earned my living from selling postcards, just postcards. But after 200 different designs, I had had enough, so I decided to concentrate entirely on painting again. The years that followed were filled with my huge quest until I finally found Realism, as you know. Many years later, I made a big painting, Holland, this one, as a tribute to that postcard time. After the postcard era, landscape was my theme for a couple of years. My old icon, Dutch painter Karel Willink, and other semi-surrealists all died in the meantime, but were still in my head where real painted art was concerned. I used Versailles and other French classical buildings and statues as the theme. Here is the Tower of Babel after a Bruegel painting, constructed in a whole new landscape with a space shuttle. Can you see that? Here's the space shuttle. As a modern way to reach the sky. A pretty pretentious painting with similar religious background as this work, where I painted 2 maquettes of the Rotterdam from paper, and the Rotterdam and the Chartres Cathedral. Moving and escaping from very turbulent Amsterdam, where I lived in the heart of the city, and was tired of all extreme things happening, I ended up in one of the boondocks of my country, where I bought a big farmhouse in a former peat area. Nothing strange about painting landscapes there. It brought me a reasonable living and rest. 3 years later, however, I was convinced Amsterdam would bring me more than this. I moved back and found a major gallery to sell this kind of work. Till the gallery shut down, and I was literally empty-handed. When I started learning from photorealists, I imitated their subjects too. I did a cityscape, like Richard Estes does, a storefront, like Tom Blackwell, a still life, and lots of motorcycles, although I did not have my motorcycle license or even any kind of passion for those heavy, noisy beasts. I hated them actually. But they challenged my skills in a way, and I only saw the abstract quality and the opportunity to paint shiny photorealist textures. I even did motorcycle fairs. I was featured in major biker magazines, sold paintings of motorcycles, and wanted to become the official Harley painter in the world. What? Why put so much energy in so much stupid paintings? I remembered feeling rebellious one Monday morning and deciding not to work on a Harley again, but instead taking photographs of the breakfast I just had finished, right there on my table. I went and painted that photo, and it was this very painting that a couple of years later would be the pivotal point in my search to develop my own style. The visitors in my own gallery that opened in '97 liked this work most, and my eyes were literally opened. The whole time, up until that point, I had been limping along two legs, and now I knew for sure that hyperrealism was entirely my thing. No landscapes anymore, no motorcycles anymore. This gallery was going to be my artistic and commercial playground I needed. And in my 5 years of running that gallery, I discovered all the main subjects and themes, like bread, plastic. Very first act, again. Sandwiches, bottles, shakers, pastries, French fries, a bike, salad bowls, autumn leaves, tulips, and my wife's hands. She's there, those hands. At last but not least, my clean answer to the art of motorcycle painting, the dishwashing. This huge work was framed in a sink rain gutter, symbolizing Dutch cleanliness and weather. It also references the clear and sober lines of Mondrian and the light of Vermeer. I worked on it for several months, and it was sold before I even had finished it. Close up is this. As you can see, a part of the kitchen mirroring here in the spoon, the small spoon, like the 17th century painters did, their own studio reflecting in their paintings. And this is the work in progress on my studio, and there's the painting hanging in the gallery. This is the original machine. I pulled it out and took some pictures after that. And it was just beautiful sun falling on the glasswork, and it was reflecting. It makes me happy. So no dealer involved, and the gallery became a hotspot in Amsterdam for a while. Mission accomplished. On to my favorite, French fries. There's no greater pleasure than eating French fries, and I prefer do it walking around somewhere in Amsterdam. When I started looking for subjects that never have been painted before, I thought there could be no bigger pleasure than painting some fries. 60-inch wide, the work almost seems to be inspired by Rembrandt Night Watch because of the colors and its light. Some time ago, I lived in the same neighborhood where Rembrandt lived, and his presence was still perceptible and inspiring. He once painted his friend, the mayor of Amsterdam, Jan Six II. It's one of the most remarkable portraits he ever did, which is still in the Six house on the Amstel River, this house. The house holds the biggest private collection of 17th and 18th century paintings in the world. It used to have also Vermeer's Milkmaid and The Little Street, but they sold them to the Rijksmuseum to finance the upkeep of the collection 100 years ago. This is me with two Jan 6. It's Jan number 10 and number 11. The 6th collection also includes some original paint bags from Rembrandt's studio, carefully kept by the family and 11th generation Jan 6, who still lives there. There were no paint tubes at Rembrandt's days. Artists used pig's bladder to keep paint fresh, using a nail to seal the opening. You can see the nails there. The bags painted here are only an average of 5 centimeters in diameter. As you can see, I also painted a small brush by Rembrandt, used by Rembrandt. My friend Jan 6 asked me to paint these paint bags in his favorite French fries painting style, and I feel privileged to be another painter so close to the family that lives and coexists with such a rich tradition. Dutch still life tradition is like a stage set with a strong spotlight on it, sometimes showcasing simple things and some other times displaying a huge collection of food for the rich. Rare exotic stuff was immortalized in paint to show off in the very competitive environment that Holland was at that time and still is today. The common style of a spotlighted stage set gave me the idea to isolate ordinary and now contemporary things from their natural habitat and to surprise the audience with a spectacular show of details, color, texture and monumentality. No food for the rich actually, but pop food. The tangible mass left on the table before cleaning up, as depicted in the painting by Willem Klaas Hedda, is humorous and shows the freedom he took to show a moment in real life. And it was his approach to still life that the man who would later become my art dealer in New York, Ivan Karp, one of the godfathers of pop art, encouraged me to continue. This is a very recent hamburger. Ordinary food, so ordinary, and pop food. No one else was painting these contemporary still lifes so realistic at that time. Because in the Netherlands there was, and still is, going on a rather boring realistic tradition of painting kept alive in the northern province of Groningen. This example is a painting by Henk Helmantel. There's nothing wrong with it as such, but nothing revelatory either. Their subjects are simply timeless, but from my point of view, they were stodgy. I wanted to break free and to restore the common people's engagement with realist art. I wanted to reinvent Dutch still life, to enrich the tradition. Something about the technique. The technique I use is oil paint and brushes on linen. Oil is easy to smooth out and to blend. It lasts forever, and its color depth is unprecedented. But drying time is often a problem. It can take as long as a week sometimes before I can paint a new glazing layer. Sanding and preparing the linen and stretching it, I do it all myself. The first underpainting is almost a complete image. I just fill in the outlines I drew during the transfer from the photo onto the linen. As you can see in this clip coming on. Something else. Plastic. Temptation. Why plastic? And why copy a priced reproduction? In a museum shop, the place to buy arty souvenirs these days, the art is being sold in functional bulk. Sealed super pics destroy our memory of the original, as do countless phone snapshots and selfies. This fascinates me. This interaction and grey area between the artwork and its spectators. Painting folded plastic over the original is like creating a time capsule, translating history into today, topped with a price sticker. Pure pop art. This is the first old master in plastic painting. It was Rembrandt's self-portrait. Well, you see that. The trick is doing the plastic in such a way as to avoid disturbing the composition and image, composition and image Vermeer carefully designed. He did a small reproduction like this and wrapped the plastic around it till it fitted snugly, and then took the photographs I organized and cultivated for the final drawing to be transferred to the canvas. Vermeer's Milkmaid was the third and the most recent one. I actually blew up the small original to human scale, 1:1 proportions. But the girl with the pearl earring is my favorite. She is gazing at you, very temptingly, from behind a small membrane holding and representing the ages. She's for sale, and she's cheap. She's also on the cover of a Thames Hudson book called Hyperrealist Art Today. And of course, this has to do with teasing the public to buy the book. Plastic is a very tempting and challenging material to paint. It diffuses and merges different realities, it transforms and it mispresents. It requires tremendous skill to capture, and I like that challenge. And after the healthy stuff, I also did some candies in plastic. It's very tempting too. No plastic involved, but sweeties and pastries are irresistible. The small, sweet world of dreaming away on an unattainable subject, painting in oil, is enticing for many of us. This is a very recent painting, Fruit Salad. It's almost a vanitas. It shows the moment before the decay. It depicts a horn of plenty and was made in 2015. It was exhibited last year in the Nassau Museum of Art in New York, in the show A Feast for the Eyes. Let's listen to what I have to say about the piece.
He's considered not just a photorealist, it's called a mega-realist, a hyper-realist, because he wants you, it's really in your face. Unlike most of the others, you look at them and he's forcing you to look at this. And he wants you not only to look at ordinary food, he wants you to love ordinary food. Yeah. You take a look at this orange slice, you can almost feel the various veins. And that's what he wants. He wants you just not consume. He wants to appreciate what it is you're eating. He, like the other painters we talked in the other room, very much influenced by Vermeer.
I grew up in the 60s, in 70s, in Rotterdam. The city was heavily bombed in the Second World War, and rebuilding was a common experience all over the city. Coming of age in that city made me familiar with change and modernity. In the USA, it was Apollo time, and the 60s brought an unprecedented blast of cultural and social creativity, and not only in the US. There was no better time to grow up and start being aware of life than those decades. Rotterdam's major art museum, Boijmans van Beuningen, was my second home. They organized several popular exhibitions, like a retrospective of Dali, and a first look at a very recent emerging American style called Hyperrealism in 1972. I was smitten. Although I mainly worked in an impressionistic style like this, I did it when I was 14 years old. Influenced by French Romanticism and my first hero, Claude Monet. He painted this, you recognize. I was immediately hooked on this contemporary smoothness and brilliant subjects from Hyperrealism. And this is a painting of Ralph Goings. It is my hero from that movement. You see, we're getting closer. It's a cityscape of Richard Estes. Until then, I had only seen such detailed realism from the old masters. Art history progressed from that point on towards modernism, which was also a direct line to abstract expressionism. Photorealism was a direct answer to this and started picturing typical American daily life just as it was. Nothing more, nothing less. Somehow, this hyperrealist technique seems more accessible because all painters working in this style were living artists. It took a decade before I discovered a massive book called Photorealism by Louis K. Mizell. This changed my life. The book showed 8 American realist painters from New York picturing ordinary America. The subjects were cars, motorcycles, diners, pinball machines, storefronts, cityscapes, and giant still lifes, and portraits. This was contemporary realism. I also started working from photos. I always take them myself. Imitating that style and subject of photorealism, I learned the technique pretty quickly. My own gallery in Amsterdam finally directed me to settle on hyperrealism. And now, 30 years later, I'm part of this exciting movement. But to realize that, I had to go to New York first. It brought me to a remarkable man. In Soho, on West Broadway, there was a gallery called O.K. Harris Works of Art. They represented many photorealists, but also hosted 30 solo shows a year featuring emerging and established artists in all styles. Their main thing was quality and uniqueness. I knew nothing about the man behind the gallery, but I found later out that owner and founder Ivan C. Karp was an icon in the American art world. Exciting times. America was discovering its own identity for the first time in art history. On the wings of post-war victory, New York now ruled the art market. Ivan Karp discovered Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein. They're here together with art dealer Leo Castelli, and he was the first to start a gallery in desolated Soho in 1969. This was Soho that time, and the first place ever where gentrification started. Ivan Karp, a small, empathic and very intelligent person who spoke incredibly fast, sat down, watched my slides, got excited about them, and immediately gave me some important advice. Don't do American subjects anymore. keep close to her own Dutch painter's soul, and then come back. A couple of years later, his son Ethan came to Amsterdam to see the paintings in person. As it turned out, I finally was invited to be represented by Okuhero's works of art. And this stunning news gave me the energy to feed my ambition of becoming a unique painter. The works they liked best were the tabletop still life paintings, which they would be able to sell easily. Ivan Karp encouraged my quest for originality and meaning. And this is where I split off from photorealism, because I moved farther and farther away from copying the photograph. I came up with the name Megarealism to make the distinction clearer. The painterly appearance of my work became very important. And this is about big works. We're getting close to the end. What are big works telling us? It's about size in every sense of the word. It's great fun to make a painting larger than life and larger than I am. It's not very difficult because I'm a very small man. So. Most of the times I choose to do a big subject. There's a reason to do so. Enlarging a subject that much, up to 70 inches and more, means you get very close to its soul. The abstract quality will be more present than on a smaller scale. You get into it deeply, leaving the original subject behind and entering a new world of hallucinatory structures and colors. You watch the cat walking there. Actually, this is the close level I am working on during a course of a day, on a 10 by 10 inch area, constantly going back to the bigger image for the feedback, checking the meaning of the work. Just imagine weeks and weeks on the same painting. There's a great deal of asceticism about it. The world shrinks and it becomes almost like a wormhole to other dimensions. I'm balancing between reality and fantasy, focusing on the ultra-sharp moment between materializing a new world coming out of my thoughts, through my fingers and brushes, and finally into paint. And when people look at work, the process goes the other way around. The contrast with the big extrovert nature of a show, when the work is on display at an exhibition, in the media and so on, couldn't be bigger. But this is as essential as the introverted, silent state of creating. These are some installation shots during the museum shots of last year's. There was a traveling hyperrealism show in Tallinn, in Brussels, and now in Rotterdam. And they showed the salad painting and the fried egg paintings, among others, of course. One or another way, a big painting always pays off and shows off and makes me more happy than I was on the self-portrait I showed you before. Big works are meant to be the bolts of lightning that hits the retina on the blue sky. Besides their visual beauty, they communicate on an unconscious and metaphorical level as well. And these marbles represent planets and molecules to me at the same time, as I found out when I was composing the work. The Higgs boson was detected for the first time at CERN and touched me deeply. The universe was so near to me. Time was literally frozen on this painting. Big work. Here's the sketch for Foodscape. This is a commissioned work from 2014 in which I have tried to unite different familiar things like ketchup, hamburger and salt pepper shakers. It's the biggest painting I ever made so far. It's 120 inches wide. This is the shoot. This is the actual hamburger. It's not very teasing, you see. Background painting. I tape it because it's more easy to do the background in that way, you know? Ketchup red. I attribute it to my hero, Ralph Goings, who showed me the way to modern tabletop still life. But I do it differently. The point of view I use is always very low, like a child, leaning with his chin on the table, gazing at the things in front of him. The twilight blue background suggests that Times Square is going to wake up, and food for the masses will be ready soon. The burger is in a moment of transition, on the edge of decay and decadence. No burger like this will ever be in an advertising campaign to entice customers, do you think? But they actually asked me, very recently, to paint one of these for a new big McDonald's campaign in France to get the French to start eating burgers again. Look at the teasing visuals they sent me. They used and photoshopped some of my existing paintings to create their idea of the new image for me to paint, how it should look. But a painting like this takes at least 12 weeks to do and longer. And they offered me a deadline of only 3 weeks. Impossible. No Sparnaay for McDonald's. I was disappointed about it, of course, but it's flattering this company now follows my perspective on the burger and has finally asked a photographer to work in my painterly style. I was talking about temptation, the temptational aspect of my work earlier, and now you can see how it works. One of my favorite and last themes to talk about, finally, is ephemerality and imperfection. You can easily discover it in many of my paintings. It characterizes my own mega-style in the hyperrealist world and adds a note realism to the perfect world that is associated with photorealism. The imperfection contributes its humor. Just look at the nasty ketchup bottle. Or a boiled egg. Look at a wonderful drop of the cracked scale. And they both remind me of another discipline I discovered in art recently. Couple of months ago. In recent years, I've turned to photography more and more on the theme urban works of art. And I discovered that images do not always have to be painted. Sometimes photography is a decent, ideal medium to express my vision, even as a painter. When I wandered past an old fragment in the official Berlin Wall a few years ago, I saw for the first time how some parts were covered in dozens of layers of spray-painted graffiti, eroded irregularly by wind and weather. I captured as much as I could on film and went back another year with even a better camera to satisfy my craving for images. I realized only later, without knowing exactly why, that I had discovered a place in the world where something truly exceptional was happening. It felt like a revelation, a sudden and simultaneous glimpse into the past and future at once. This must be how an archaeologist feels when stumbling across an unexpectedly significant discovery. Seemingly unguided, this entropy of many flaking layers generates a harmonic desire that makes pure beauty from the decay in its fresh, new frame. An uninviting stretch of ugly grey concrete, tacked by nearly 1,000 graffiti artists over the years, has been transformed into one of the most beautiful, colorful, liberated places in the world. By taking photos of it, I was able to turn it into a new work of art and show it to everyone. In this abstract world, I even discovered a new realism, some new figurative meanings. The actually spots are not very large, like this sounding. This graphitical archaeology series is a part of the bigger Urban Works of Art project, in which I had 2 solo shows last year, one in New York and one in the Netherlands. Your teacher, Simon, and my friend Simon, got hooked on the project, picked it up and wrote a major essay on it. And his conclusion, that sometimes something beautiful can be generated out of entropy, also in a social way, touched me deeply, as it was exactly the point I wanted to make, but wasn't able to articulate. This very bad remnant of European history finally generated visual freedom and beauty. Now back to painting again. This is the big work from 2007. I love painting ephemerality, referencing the vanitas painting, but also to discover how far you can go in painting something ugly and resistant while still showing beauty and temptation. We just like the chaos in the painting, because it's fun knowing that it's giant but not real. In this stew and potatoes painting, there's a similar thing. It was dedicated to my father, because he used to cut the meat in such small pieces that we couldn't avoid the disgusting fat pieces he forced us to eat. I really hated that stringy stewed meat. But these days, he has forgotten about. And I love to make a nice, rich stew on Sunday afternoon. Slow cooking, you know. Okay, I'm settled now. I found out my own style and exposure, and it paid off. I'm even doing a lecture now. I'm in the museums, I'm on television, have books, documentary. I was trending topic on the internet, and I was even, yes, in the sun. I still am dedicated to get into discovering and new subjects and expressions. This is me, about 18 years old, I guess your age about. And now I'm 62. All of you here are just at the beginning of a life full of expectations. The greatest show on earth is yet to start for you, and the best thing to do is longing for your own style in everything, tiny or big. This is the very first time I baked an egg ever. No, the very first time I baked an egg ever. I did it without butter, and it failed totally, almost causing a kitchen fire. Then someone, probably my mother, taught me something you just can't find out yourself. And it worked. Thank you for listening.